I'm as surprised about the results of the end of August reading as I think you will be. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my wrap-up for August, kind of the end of August. I already kind of posted a video about, I think, the first couple of weeks of August and what I read. So this will be the things I read at the end of August with one exception. And I want to kind of look at these books and these four books as kind of measuring a book's success by what I think the author's intent was. I think this is kind of important. I know there's a whole theory we shouldn't care what the author intended and what the author wanted to do doesn't matter. I'm not one of those people, so I'm going to evaluate these books based on what I think the author intended, based on what I can pick up on from reading them, and kind of then tell you which one of the books I think was most effective in that way, because I think this is a way in which we can look at books and evaluate books that I think is completely, or comes closer to being objective, evaluating a book by what we believe to be it's about. So to begin with, there is one book that I forgot to mention in last time's wrap up, and that is that I read or listened to on audiobook, Planet of Exile by Ursula K. LeGuin. This is the second book in what is referred to as the Hainish cycle of novels. I believe it's set on the same planet that Rokanan's world was set, but a long time in the future, and it basically involves three different, I'm going to call them races of people who coexist on this planet and have for some time, who are very different from one another, one of whom seems to be descended from aliens who are aliens to that planet who came and landed there, and the others who are more indigenous to that population, and how two of those groups have to learn to work together in order to survive an attack from the third. And it involves kind of an interracial then love story between a male character from the alien race and a female character from one of the indigenous races. I thought it was pretty good. I don't think it's I enjoyed Rokanan's world much more, but I thought LeGuin's writing here was effective. Her descriptions of combat and action situation I thought here were really good. I thought the love story was a little bit predictable, a little bit Romeo and Juliet, but it's kind of hard to come up with a new theme for love stories, and so I thought that was okay. But I did want to mention that I did listen to that, and I'll be continuing on listening to Ursula K. Le Guin's books in the Hainish cycle as long as they're available from the Libby app. So that's what I listened to. And then the books I read. So August is Women in Translation Month, and so I read a third book by a woman in translation, and that is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. And this was translated from the German, or did she write this in English? I think she must have written in German. Yes, this was translated from the German by Michael Hoffman. This is the third book by Jenny Erpenbeck I've read, and to be honest with you, this is the one that I have liked the least. But having said that, it is one that I continue to think about after the fact. So basically what we have here is a love story between a much older German man and a young German woman, literally age of 18 or 19, and the man I believe is probably in his late 40s or early 50s, in East Germany in the years leading up to the Berlin Wall coming down and Germany being reunified. And I believe what Erpenbeck intended here in Kairos was to kind of create some kind of parallel between the moment in which this young woman and this man met as a really important moment, kind of a transcendent moment, and that moment in which the Berlin Wall came down. And I believe really what's intended is not necessarily to parallel those two things. I mean, it's not as though one represents East Germany and one West Germany. That's not the case at all. They're both East Germans, but kind of one representing somebody who is really grounded in East Germany's past in all kinds of ways, which I won't spoil. And then the younger woman who is going to be there, who will really more effectively transition from communist East Germany into a unified Germany and all the problems that it holds. There's a fair amount of nostalgia, I think, here on the part of Erpenbeck, who is herself grew up in East Germany and was alive and younger than she is now, obviously, at the time of reunification. There's some nostalgia for what was lost when East Germany ceased to exist, which is, I think, a kind of interesting thing to write about. And then there's this relationship, this really fraught, difficult, I'm going to say largely unsuccessful relationship in lots of ways, but which nonetheless lasts for decades. So all of that I thought was fine. I'm not sure that her intent to kind of blend that nostalgia for East Germany in with the story, this love story as it exists in the book, really works that well, and to be honest with you, what's called a love story here in the book I found to be kind of deeply disturbing. A couple of things about it that I will tell you. It's not just that there's an older man, younger woman, it's that this older man has memories of this younger woman as an actual child. I find that to be disturbing, to get involved in a relationship there. And then also, this older man is controlling, and he is abusive in some ways, not necessarily in non-consensual ways, but there are some disturbing aspects, I think, to the relationship, which kind of calls it into question. Now, those things do add more interest, but I'm not sure they actually help kind of create this parable or this kind of idea of change from, Communist East Germany reunification. I'm not sure that it all works in quite the way Erpenbeck thought. So, there's some brilliant writing here. There are some really powerful scenes. There's scenes that develop a lot of interest, and then there are just, I think, passages that, to a certain extent, are just Erpenbeck going off and riffing as a writer. Anyway, I wasn't completely disappointed in it, but I didn't think it was great. I also read 2 more books for the Booker Prize. They're on the Booker Prize long list, and what I'm doing really with the Booker Prize long list is I'm reading books that are available through my library. My local library, surprisingly, has been getting in here in the last few weeks a lot of Booker Prize nominated books, and so I've been checking those out and reading them. As a matter of fact, these 2 are past due, and I'm not sure if my library has spines or not, but anyway. The first one of those books I read was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. If you don't know, this is about a group of astronauts who are on the International Space Station. Each has their own, thing they study and jobs they do, and each has their own story. And the characters are somewhat lightly developed, I think. And the story is, really just a story of them watching the Earth, thinking about their lives back on Earth, and kind of engaging in philosophical thoughts about, how little they can change, how small one person is, the infinity of space. And I think what Harvey intends is for this to be a book of ideas. He intends for us to think about things like climate change, environmental destruction, about life and death, about our estrangement from the people even that we're closest to, all kind of wrapped up in and kind of presented in a fairly prosaic way in the fact that these people on board the space station are in fact separated from everybody else. I believe there's 6 of them. This will give you some idea of how unmemorable the characters are. Is I think there were 6 of them. At first when I started talking I thought there were only 4. So, that's all well and good. I will say I didn't find any of the ideas developed here to be particularly profound. And in a book I think that is about ideas, I think that's a problem. I think Harvey here intends for her ideas to be profound and for her writing to be beautiful, and she certainly makes the attempt. And I'm not going to say it's not beautiful writing from time to time. I'm going to say it's not the kind of writing that appeals to me in lots of ways from time to time. I think the biggest problem with this book is the research that Samantha Harvey did. And this is one of those things, as somebody who writes history, research is obviously really important to me. And, writers of historical fiction are, I think, required to do research to give their novels some verisimilitude, to make it seem real, to ground in the time period in which it takes place. Harvey here is writing more or less in the present day. And yet she's done a lot of research. There, in the acknowledgement, she gives her thanks to NASA, and I suspect to a fair number of people who are involved in the space program, perhaps astronauts, who I feel like she relied too heavily on to describe the experience. It's almost as though she felt like she had to honor everybody she talked to in NASA or in the space program by including some of the thoughts they had as they drifted around the Earth and the space station. They made all these orbits, and to describe what they saw. So we see this constant description of what can be seen out the window, where they are, what part of the world they're over, where they're crossing into, what they felt like when they're on a spacewalk, and what they felt like when they were exercising, and how important that was. And there's just a lot of details here that I think bog the story down. I feel like this is a case where an author's done so much research, and they feel like they have to honor and include as much of that research as possible, that it actually damages the book as a work of fiction. So far from me in terms of Booker reading, this is not a particularly successful book. It's the 4th Booker book I've read, and I for right now, would place it at the bottom, behind, what is this one? Wild Houses by Colin Barrett, behind Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, definitely, and way behind James by Percival Everett. The other book I read that was on the Booker long list is Enlightenment by Sarah Perry. Again, I checked this one out because it was available from my library. Have a hold on 2 more that are available from my library. Hopefully get them this month as well. And Enlightenment is a very different book, with I think very different intents. And kind of, reading it right after reading Orbital by Sarah Harvey, I think kind of highlighted how different the intent of this book was. I think this is a book which is intended to make us care about the characters and the connections they have to one another, and kind of the things that connect us to other people in our lives around us. There is a connection in that the main character here, I believe his name is Thomas Harvey, becomes obsessed with studying the stars and outer space, and all the things go along with that. There's a parallel to a woman who lived back in the, I want to say, the 1880s, the 1890s, who was similarly obsessed, and how that obsession and comets kind of tie these, 4 major characters together. The book is incredibly descriptively written. Lots of adjectives and descriptions of all kinds of things. And so I think you could describe the writing as lush, as artsy, intentionally, and therefore not necessarily, again, my kind of writing. Additionally, I didn't find any of the characters in the book particularly interesting. I wasn't worried about what happened to them. I wasn't worried about if their friendships stayed, if their romances succeeded or failed. And so, this is a book that I almost DNF'd after 70 pages. But it was after that 70-page point when I started thinking about what Sarah Perry's intention was in writing it as this kind of character study, and what binds people together, what links people together, and how frail those things can be, and how those relationships can fall apart. And that increased my interest in reading it, so that I did read to the end. But I didn't find the characters to be particularly compelling, and the writing occasionally was just mind-numbingly descriptive, almost too much. Too much description. In addition to that, Perry has a tendency to lead right up to an event, right up to something that's revelatory, and then break away and go to another character's point of view, and then we get the story, after the fact almost, it feels. And I found that to be a little bit frustrating from time to time. Anyway, I would put Sarah Perry's book above Orbital, but below Wild Houses, which, not all that special. Definitely below Wandering Stars, and way below James. And then the last book I read, I actually started reading this on August 31st. I just finished it today. Today is September the 2nd, so it's a bit of a cheat to call it a book that's in August, but I did finish reading it today, and I thought it would make a good part of this video because I read Beach Read by Emily Henry. As you may know, occasionally I mean like once every 18 months, I pick up a romance novel. My wife's really gotten back into reading, and she's been reading a lot of books lately, and Emily Henry and, what's the other one's name? Well, I can't remember right now. But, a lot of kind of the big name, I don't know if this is women's fiction or romance, kind of somewhere in the middle. And so I thought, you know what, I'll read this. So we'll have, something in common. I can have ideas about her book. We can talk about it, and hopefully we'll be able to do that a little bit later. I've been reluctant to talk to her about it because I didn't want to give away the ending, even though I think I knew what was going to happen. But this is a book involving 2 writers who knew one another at the University of Michigan. They were kind of rivals at the University of Michigan, and they end up, through circumstances I won't describe here, living in beach houses on the lakes, on the shores of Lake Michigan that are side by side, and renewing their acquaintance. And obviously, this is going to end in some kind of a romance, and then writing books at the same time. As a matter of fact, as their friendship develops, what they challenge one another to do is to write a book in the other style. So the female character here, whose name is January, writes romance, women's fiction books. And the male character, Augustus, I'm a little bit iffy on having one character named January and another essentially August, but anyway, writes literary fiction, and they challenge one another to kind of write in the other style. And, whichever one, writes the best book, the other will blurb that book and promote that book, etc. And that's kind of their challenge. And this, I think, leads to the best and most charming part of the novel. One of the things I think is really works well here. If you haven't picked up on this, I think Emily Henry's book works. It does what she intends it to do. It entertains. It gets us in lives. It makes us, I think, care about the lives of these characters and whether or not they get together, and really how they get together under what circumstances, in a way in which I think Sarah Perry's book really didn't, and it makes us care about what the books they're writing. And so to me, the best part of the book is when each one kind of, as a part of this challenge, each one has to try to help the other learn how to write a book in their style. And so they go on these kind of friend dates in which, to help teach January how to write literary fiction, Augustus takes her out to do interviews, and to gather and to do research. To help Augustus learn how to write romantic comedy, she takes him to places which would be, obvious kind of meet cute places or romantic places to go, to have characters go in a romantic comedy. And I thought this was really, really brilliant, because what I think it allows Henry to do is to kind of poke fun at, gentle but very real fun at her own genre of writing, at kind of the tropes or the standard things that happen in that kind of writing. They go line dancing, they go to Zelda, I don't need your attention. Stop. No. Sorry. They go line dance, they go to carnival, they go to all these kind of places where you'd think a romantic comedy or a romance would take place. And I think Henry does a great job of setting that up. I was talking to my wife just a minute ago, and I said I thought the first 170 pages of the book, building up to the romantic encounter, were better than the 170 pages that followed leading away from the romantic encounter. But this is, I think, was the most successful book I read at the end of the month, in that it does exactly what I think Emily Henry intended for it to do. It's not better written, it's not more complicated, it didn't make me think more than the other three books I just mentioned, but I thought it succeeded in doing what it wanted to do more, which is, strictly speaking, I think, entertain. And with that added element, I think kind of wryly and intelligently looking at the conventions of the romance genre and of literary fiction, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Kind of the pretentiousness sometimes of literary fiction. I think it did a great job in kind of gently skewering both, but in a way which doesn't make us, feel like one of the others being made fun of. Anyway, I thought it was a really successful book in that regard. Am I going to read the rest of Emily Henry's library? Probably not. But I did think it was really successful. So I did want to, that's kind of the wrap-up then for August. And then September is Shorty September, and so I will be reading a lot of short books. I thought I would just share those with you right now. The first would be, I think, my 6th Percival Everett book. This one is Watershed, a novel. I have no idea what it's about. I also intend to pick up So Much Blue by Percival Everett and read that for the reading event. I think it's called Framed September, something like that. It's a reading event around reading books about art or that relate to art, and so I'm hoping to get that too. That would be 2 more Percival Everett books. I'm also going to read this book that I bought in Iceland, and notice that's why I left the price sticker on there, because I like to do that with books I buy in other countries. Alice by the Fire by Jan Foss. This is a book which was recommended to me when I first started reading the Septology, and kind of a book I think involving some of the same characters and the same style of writing. Really looking forward to that. No one should be surprised to see that I have Eva Baltazar's 3rd book, Permafrost, set up for Shorty September. This is translated from the Catalan by Julia Sanchez, as the other 2 books, Mammoth and Boulder, have been. This is no doubt going to be a book that I really like, because I just really like Eva Baltazar. September isn't a mystery reading month, but I did pick up a new mystery by Georges Simenon. This is a Maigret novel. It's called The Cellars of the Majestic. I love these little books, even though I think they're a little bit pricey, but I love these little books, and every time I go to the local mystery bookstore here in Houston called Murder by the Book, I buy a Georges Simenon book, and so I'll be reading that. Also, at Half Price Books, I found a hardback copy in really good condition of Toni Morrison's Home. This is one of only 2 Morrison novels which I have not read, and it's short, so I'll be reading this for Shorty September. The only other Morrison I would have to read then in terms of her novels is Bless the Child, so I'll be getting to that sometime. And then my buddy Alan, my partner and one of my partners in Faulkner in August, sent me this book by Louise Erdrich a long time ago. It's a nonfiction book called Books and Islands in Ojibwe Country, Traveling Through the Land of My Ancestors. It's a nonfiction book. It contains some essays, I believe, by Erdrich, or a collection of thoughts about that. And so I'm going to get to that as nonfiction. That also qualifies for Shorty September. By the way, Shorty September is hosted by Bert from Past Story Time and Heather from Too Many Heathers, I believe is the name of the channel. They have a whole like bingo board thing, and I may go back in a future video in September and start placing these books somewhere in that, but I'll try to leave links to their announcement videos down below. Shorty September, one of my favorite reading events here on BookTube. And then I also have Jar City, which is a mystery by Arnoldur Indridsson, who is an Icelandic crime writer. It's translated from Icelandic by Bernard Scudder. You know, my wife and my son and I went to Iceland in July, and so I wanted to read this book as a part of, you know, to remember being in Iceland. This one's set in Reykjavik, where we stayed when we were in Iceland. So I'm hoping to get those books. Then I have two more. I have holds on two more Booker Prize books. I think I have a hold on Held. I have a hold on Held, and The Safekeep, I believe, are the other two that are there. And then if I finish those in time, I think I can put a hold on Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle and read that one too, even though I haven't heard a whole lot of positive things about that. Believe it or not, or you probably can believe it, that makes me want to read it even more. Anyway, there you go. There is my end of August wrap-up and kind of my July TBR pile of possibilities. If you've read any of these books, have thoughts about any of these books, or anything I said in this video, please leave those in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.